China's real estate sector is in trouble like never before. Evergrande has reported back-to-back annual losses of over $81 billion. With this, the country is one step closer to a complete economic crash. But is all hope lost for China and its real estate sector? Let's dive in. What is Evergrande? Xu Jiayin founded Evergrande in 1996. It soon became one of the largest property developers globally. This was partly because of China's booming economy and the rising demand for housing. Evergrande had a vision to provide affordable homes to the Chinese. The company adopted a unique business model. It involved getting land in various cities and constructing residential complexes. The company borrowed money from banks and gave bonds to investors to finance its project. This strategy allowed Evergrande to fund its expansion. It was also great for the growing demand for housing in China. As a result, the company's projects gained popularity among home buyers. This attracted even more investors that wanted to profit from China's real estate. Evergrande started expanding across many industries, such as sports and entertainment, by 2021. It also bought the Guangzhou Football Club, rebranding it as Guangzhou Evergrande Taobao FC. But things started rolling downhill after the COVID crisis. China's property market soon started to cool down. On top of that, the government imposed stricter restrictions. That's when Evergrande started facing liquidity and debt issues. And that was the start. But for all this housing crisis, how did it start? China's housing crisis. The Chinese housing crisis began in the early 2020s, caused by high house costs and debt. This was because a lot of people had bought houses during the 2000s. It was this boom that allowed big names like Evergrande to become successful. During this time, the investors that made Evergrande so big started taking interest. People borrowed a lot of money to invest in development, and so did Evergrande. But if you remember from earlier, so did the Chinese people. So China got worried and introduced laws and rules to limit how much money one could take as a loan. By then, a lot of debt had already added up. Take this for an example. In 2020, the Chinese government made a new rule called the Three Red Lines. This was for property developers and set a limit to how much money they could borrow based on new metrics. Developers had to follow three important rules about how much debt they had. This, compared to their cash, the value of their company and their assets, decided their credit. This rule ensured that developers didn't borrow too much money and become risky. These rules made things harder for developers like Evergrande to manage their debts or sell homes. Because people started worrying and getting loans got harder, people stopped buying houses. Because of this, Evergrande faced financial problems. People worried about the impact on the whole housing market and China's economy. The fall of Evergrande. The Chinese government's rules made it harder for Evergrande to borrow money. It also made it tougher for them to sell the homes they built. After that, they started defaulting on payments, which means missing repayments. One of the biggest issues Evergrande faced was its sales. This means the number of homes they could sell started to go down. In 2021, they had losses of around 476 billion yuan. That's about $66 billion in US dollars. And in the next year, 2022, their losses were 106 billion yuan, which is about $15 billion. When you add up those losses over 2 years, it's approximately $81 billion. Even before this, Evergrande had lost a lot of money and still owed so much to other parties. The situation was so bad that Evergrande failed to give their financial reports in time. This scared a lot of people even more. What was going on with this development giant? In March 2022, the stock market stopped letting people buy or sell Evergrande stocks. Stocks are like shares of a company, and when trading stops, it means people can't buy or sell those shares anymore. This made people lose even more trust in the company, and they were unsure about what would happen next. Finally, the Chinese government said, "Enough is enough." They demanded Evergrande start debt restructuring. Now, debt restructuring is like a big financial makeover for a company. It's a plan made to help Evergrande fix its money problems and get back on track. The government wanted to prevent a big collapse or complete failure of Evergrande. If that happened, it could have hurt not the company itself, but also China's whole economy. This would affect many people and businesses. But that's what happened. In the past 2 years, more than 50 Chinese property developers have been in debt. They've been unable to repay approximately $100 billion in foreign loans. And listen to this, 39 of these developers are trying to work out new plans with the people they owe money to. Oh, and they're struggling with a total of $117 billion in debt they can't repay. The aftermath. Guess what? That meant sky-high housing prices, rents, and taxation on other basic amenities. This points towards a bigger issue. Not toward the development sector, but China's greater real estate industry. Around 4% of housing projects in China are incomplete. They were half-built and are now ghost towns and vacant towers. This shows how big of a mess developers in the Chinese economy are in. But that's not the only problem. Local governments in China are struggling with a lot of debt themselves. This is because of how they have spent money over the years. The COVID-19 pandemic made things worse. It caused a drop in the money they earned from real estate and made them spend more on health. They now do not have the money to help their real estate sector. This puts the Chinese government in a difficult position. So now the living costs, including housing costs, are up by more than 2 times. Foreign investors are now feeling unsure about investing in China's real estate sector. The country's leaders say they're open for business, but some actions make it harder for businesses from other countries to work there. Take the U.S.-China issue. The U.S. government imposed sanctions on Chinese trade goods. This made big brands, especially in the manufacturing sector, move to other countries. It makes sense then that China's economy only grew 0.8% in the second quarter of 2023. It also makes sense that many young people in China don't have jobs. This makes the economic situation pressured, and without the help of the government and foreign investors, the real estate sector is in a lot of trouble. Big banks on Wall Street are warning that the crisis could slow down the economy for a while. It might even affect nearby countries that rely on the Chinese economy. Of course, the real estate sector is an important player in this. Experts say this could cause the property market a while to recover. And this could be like climbing up the letter L. First it falls down, and then it takes time to go up again. But how can China afford to grow? Goldman Sachs has suggested that the property sector's problems will last many years. It is possible that it might hurt less in 2023 than in 2022. Recent data shows China's property sector is still struggling to turn things around. But despite things turning for the worst, there is still some hope. Looking forward, the Chinese government didn't do much to help the real estate sector. Instead, they raised housing costs, worsening the situation even more. But the local governments helped in better ways. Over 300 cities have added measures to support the housing market since early 2022, and a few of those regulations have even worked in places. For example, in Beihai, they lowered the money needed as a down payment when buying a second property. Other cities used housing to help with other things, like elderly care and attracting talented people. In Xinjiang, they encourage elderly people to live with their families. If they did, their family could buy another house. Special funds departments would fix the problems. And that's not all. Even the Chinese government also wanted to help. In January 2023, they introduced a 16-point rescue package. This came with new rules for housing loans and financial aid for developers. With all these measures in place, different cities might recover at different rates. Some cities with more people and better economies might recover faster, but smaller cities might take longer to get better. In the future, China hopes to keep trying to control the housing market to make sure prices are stable. They want to help people buy their first and second homes, but still need to work on specific plans. A lot is unclear at this point, but experts believe there is some hope for recovery. The way forward needs to be very calculated, though. One idea is to tax properties in areas much better off than others, as they tried in some cities. This is also known as taxing the rich. China's population is also getting smaller and older. This means there might be fewer people looking for homes. And as cities grow less, the demand for new houses may slow down. China's leaders want to rely less on real estate development for economic growth. They aim to keep housing prices and new construction stable in the coming years. This is a big change for China and the world. In the past, the real estate sector grew faster than the economy, making up about 15% of the yearly output. This growth helped countries like Australia, Brazil, and Zambia as they benefited from China's demand for construction materials. Now, with a focus on a stable real estate sector, China's demand for these materials may decrease, affecting their growth in this area. And as the world inches back from the events of the pandemic, who knows? Even China might recoil from this crisis. Do you think that the Chinese real estate sector is gone for good? Let us know in the comments section. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for much more like this.